The land did not look like much to strangers. A stretch of open prairie, low grass burned pale by the sun, a few stubborn cottonwoods clinging to a dry creek bed. No grand house, no wide gates. Just a modest ranch set back from the dirt road, its fence leaning in places, its windmill creaking softly when the afternoon wind passed through. Caleb owned it all, or maybe the land owned him. He rose before the sun most mornings, when the air still carried a bite and the horizon glowed faintly blue. By habit, not urgency. He pulled on worn boots, a faded shirt stiff with years of dust and sweat, and stepped outside without looking back. The ranch greeted him the same way it always did, quiet, patient, waiting. His days followed a rhythm carved by repetition. He checked the fence line first, walking slow, hammer in hand, tapping loose posts back into place. Wire cut into his palms, but he barely noticed anymore. After that came the well. The bucket rose heavy with water, rope biting against the pulley, the sound familiar enough to be comforting. He poured carefully, never wasting a drop. Then the cattle. They were few. Caleb kept it that way. Enough to survive the winter, not enough to invite trouble. He spoke to them in low tones, more out of habit than need, watching their steady breathing, the slow swish of tails. Animals didn't ask questions. They didn't leave without reason. When the sun climbed higher, the land opened wide and empty around him. No neighbors close enough to wave. No voices drifting on the wind. Just space, endless and honest. Caleb had been offered more than once. A trader passing through suggested buying the land next to his. A rancher from the south hinted at partnerships, bigger herds, faster money. Caleb always shook his head. Not interested, didn't need it. What he had was enough. Enough water, enough cattle, enough land to stand on. The people in town respected him for that. They nodded when he rode in for supplies, trusted him with quiet tasks, fixing a roof, watching a herd, settling a dispute without raising his voice. Caleb paid his debts, kept his word, never drank too much, never talked more than necessary, but respect was not the same as closeness. No one lingered at his table. No one asked where he went after sundown. When the work was done, the town let him drift back to the prairie, alone again, as if that was where he belonged. And maybe it was. At night, Caleb sat on the porch, boots planted on dry earth, the sky stretching endlessly above him. Stars came out sharp and bright, unsoftened by city light. Coyotes called in the distance. Somewhere far off, a train whistle cut through the dark, then faded. Those were the moments when the old memory stirred. It never came loud, never dramatic. Just a quiet thought, like a hand brushing against a scar. There had been a time when someone stood beside him on this porch, when laughter had filled the space between the fence and the house, when a voice had promised, easy and certain, "I'll stay." He had believed it. Belief came easy back then, but seasons changed. Hard days came. The land demanded patience, and patience wasn't something everyone could give. One morning, the space beside him was empty. The porch felt wider, the promise thinner than dust. She had left without anger, without cruelty, just gone. Since then, Caleb had learned something the land taught better than any man. You don't chase what chooses to walk away. You fix what's broken. You tend what remains. You stay. The prairie did not reward him with comfort or applause. It offered no guarantees. Only the chance to stand his ground, day after day, and prove quietly that he was not the kind of man who ran when things grew hard. Caleb did not abandon the land. But once, long ago, the land had watched as someone abandoned him, and he carried that truth the way he carried his tools, close, worn, and never spoken aloud. Caleb rode into town just after noon. The sun hung high and unforgiving, baking the dirt road into a hard ribbon of dust. His horse moved at an easy pace, hooves steady, familiar with the way. The town hadn't changed much over the years. Same weathered storefronts, same hitching posts worn smooth by generations of rains, same low murmur of voices drifting out from the general store. He came for supplies, nails, salt, a length of rope, nothing more. He dismounted near the hitching rail, tying his horse with practiced hands. The smell of dry wood, leather, and sun-warmed earth filled the air. Caleb adjusted his hat and stepped toward the store, already thinking about the long ride back and the fence line that still needed mending. That was when he saw her. She stood near the edge of the street, half shaded by the awning of the dry goods shop. For a moment, Caleb thought the heat was playing tricks on him. The years folded in on themselves, and the town seemed to hold its breath. Sophie. She looked different, but not enough to soften the recognition. Her hair was pinned back neatly now, the loose strands tamed. Her dress was simple, practical, the kind worn by women who kept clean homes and steady routines. No dust clung to her hem, no wind tugged at her sleeves, but her eyes. They carried a weariness he did not remember, a tired stillness, as if she had learned to smile without letting it reach too far inside. Caleb stopped short. The old ache stirred, sharp and unwelcome, like a muscle pulled after years of forgetting it existed. Beside her stood a man who made no effort to blend into the background. Nathan. He leaned against his saddle with casual confidence, one boot propped on the rail, laughing loud enough for half the street to hear. His hat was new, his shirt clean. His horse, tall, well-bred, restless, stamped the ground impatiently as if eager to be seen. Nathan spoke with his hands, wide gestures cutting through the air. He smiled easily, the kind of smile that came from knowing how to leave before things got hard. He looked like someone passing through, and proud of it. Sophie turned then, as if she felt Caleb's gaze before she saw him. Her eyes found him across the street. The look that crossed her face lasted only a second. Surprise, then something slower, heavier. Her smile faltered, just enough for Caleb to notice. She held his gaze longer than courtesy required. Too long. Caleb felt the years collapse between them. Suddenly he was younger, standing on this same street with dust on his boots and hope still intact. Hearing promises spoken lightly, as if staying were the easiest thing in the world. "I'll stay," she had said once. "This is enough." The memory tightened around his chest. Nathan said something that made Sophie laugh, but the sound rang thin. She looked back at Caleb again, her eyes searching, lingering, as if measuring the distance between who he had been and who he was now. Caleb forced himself to breathe. He told himself he was a different man, that the land had shaped him into something steady, something whole, but the old questions crept back all the same, quiet and relentless. Was I not enough? Not smooth enough? Not easy enough to choose? He glanced at Nathan, the polished boots, the careless confidence, the way the man seemed untouched by responsibility. The contrast pressed down on him, heavy as the noon sun. Caleb had never been that kind of man. He stayed when fences broke, when wells ran low, when nights stretched long and silent. He stayed when leaving would have been easier, and once that had not been enough. Sophie finally looked away. Her attention pulled back to Nathan as he swung into his saddle with a practiced flourish. He tipped his hat to a passing woman, grinning as if the world were a stage built just for him. Caleb stood still, rooted to the hard-packed earth. The town noise returned around him, boots scraping wood, a door creaking open, a child laughing somewhere down the street. Life went on, indifferent to old wounds. He turned toward the general store, his steps measured, his face unreadable. But inside, the past had already done its work. The girl who had once left had come back into view. And with her came the memory of what it felt like to be passed over, for a life that looked easier, brighter, and far less anchored. Caleb left town in the late afternoon, when the sun began to slide west and the street shadows stretched long across the dirt. The noise faded quickly behind him, voices, laughter, the clatter of hooves, until only the wind remained. The prairie opened up again, wide and unforgiving. He rode without hurry, letting the steady rhythm of his horse pull his thoughts loose. Sophie's face still lingered in his mind, the way her eyes had searched him, as if something unfinished might still be claimed. Caleb pushed the thought aside. The land ahead demanded attention. It always did. Near the far edge of his property, where the grass thinned and the soil turned pale and cracked, he saw movement. At first he thought it was an animal. Then she stepped into the open. She stood just beyond the fence line, one hand braced against a post, her posture rigid but controlled. Her clothing marked her immediately, Apache, earth-toned fabric, worn but carefully kept, dust clinging to the hems. Her dark hair was pulled back, a few loose strands catching the light. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from a long day's work, but the deeper kind, the kind that settled into the bones. One sleeve was darkened with dried blood. A shallow cut traced along her forearm, hastily wrapped, poorly tended. Her eyes lifted when she noticed Caleb. They were steady, watchful, not pleading. Caleb dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask why she stood there. The border between their worlds lay clearly marked by that sagging fence, and he did not step across it. "You're near my well," he said finally, voice low, even. "Water's there if you need it." She studied him in silence. Caleb turned and led his horse a few steps toward the shade of a cottonwood, drawing a bucket from the well. The rope creaked as it rose, heavy and full. He poured carefully into a tin cup and set it on the ground near the fence. Then he stepped back. She waited a moment longer, as if testing the air itself. When she moved, it was with measured caution. She drank slowly, not spilling a drop. When she finished, she lowered herself to sit beneath the tree's thin shadow, shoulders relaxing just slightly. Caleb returned the bucket to its place. He did not ask about the wound, did not ask why she had come alone. In this part of the country, questions carried weight. He knew better than to press where answers might cost more than they gave. The silence between them stretched, unbroken and unhurried. The sun dipped lower, the heat easing into something bearable. Dust drifted lazily in the light. Caleb leaned against the fence post, resting without quite sitting, the land breathing around them. She watched him then, not openly, not rudely, but with a focus that made him aware of every small movement, the way he shifted his weight, the way his eyes tracked the horizon, the way he did not reach for his gun. Her gaze lingered, assessing, measuring something beyond appearances. Caleb met her eyes once. He saw no fear there, only caution, and something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. When the cup was empty, he refilled it and placed it within her reach again. This time she nodded once. Not thanks, not approval, just acknowledgement. That was enough. They sat like that for a while, sharing nothing but water and shade. No promises passed between them, no understanding spoken aloud. The land itself seemed to hold the moment steady, as if aware that something small, but unalterable, had begun. When she finally stood, she adjusted the cloth around her arm. She did not cross the fence. She did not introduce herself. She only looked at Caleb one last time, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, her figure growing smaller as she moved back toward the broken edge of the prairie. Caleb watched until she disappeared from sight. He did not know who she was. He did not know where she would go next. But something about the quiet of that meeting settled deep within him, heavier than memory, steadier than regret. For the first time since leaving town, his thoughts were no longer caught in the past. They were rooted firmly in the present. The next time Caleb rode into town, he did not come alone. It was a market day, the kind that pulled people in from scattered ranches and distant homesteads. Wagons lined the street. Horses snorted and stamped at the hitching posts. Voices overlapped in low conversation, punctuated by laughter and the clink of metal. Caleb tied his horse as he always did, movements steady, unhurried. She stood beside him. The Apache woman did not draw attention to herself, yet the space around her felt altered by her presence. Her steps were quiet, her posture straight. The bandage on her arm had been replaced with a cleaner wrap, the wound still there, but controlled. She kept her eyes forward, taking in the town without curiosity or fear. No one asked who she was. No one dared. Caleb did not offer an explanation. He did not touch her arm or guide her hand. He simply stepped forward, and she matched his pace, close enough that the distance between them closed without effort. They stood at the edge of the street, watching the movement of people and animals pass like a slow current. That was when Sophie saw them. She was near the general store, a basket tucked neatly against her side. Nathan stood with her, one hand resting easy on his saddle horn, his voice carrying as he joked with another cowboy. He laughed loudly, head thrown back, the sound sharp and confident. Sophie's gaze drifted, then stopped. Her eyes settled on Caleb, and then on the woman beside him. Something shifted in her expression. Not jealousy, not anger, recognition. Caleb felt it before he looked. The familiar tightening in his chest tried to return, but it found no hold. He turned calmly, meeting Sophie's gaze without flinching. Nathan followed her line of sight, his grin faltering for half a breath before he masked it with a careless smirk. "Well," Nathan said, tipping his hat slightly, eyes flicking toward the Apache woman. "Didn't expect to see you back in town so soon." Caleb nodded once. No greeting, no challenge. The Apache woman remained silent, her presence steady and unyielding. She did not step behind Caleb. She did not step ahead of him. She stood exactly where she was, at his side, equal in the open air. A few people nearby slowed their movements. Conversations softened. Someone cleared their throat. No one spoke her name. No one asked her purpose. Because in this land, a person did not stand beside a man like Caleb without reason. Sophie's fingers tightened around the basket handle. Her eyes moved between Caleb and the woman, lingering longer than she meant them to. She searched his face for something familiar, hesitation perhaps, or the old openness that had once belonged only to her. She did not find it. Caleb's expression was calm, grounded, the look of a man who knew where he stood. "You look well," Sophie said finally, her voice careful, measured. Caleb inclined his head. "So do you." Nathan shifted his weight, boots scraping the dirt. "Didn't know you had company these days." Caleb said nothing. He did not need to. The Apache woman met Nathan's gaze for the briefest moment. Her eyes were dark and steady, offering no invitation, no retreat. Just acknowledgement. Then she looked away, as if he were already dismissed. Nathan's smile thinned. Sophie saw it then. Not a declaration, not a claim, but something far more unsettling. Caleb was not alone anymore. He was not waiting. He was not reaching for what had already left. He was standing beside someone who did not need his name to belong there. A gust of wind swept dust through the street. The market noise resumed its rhythm. Someone laughed nearby. A horse snorted. Caleb turned slightly, angling his body just enough to signal movement. The Apache woman followed without question. They walked past Sophie and Nathan, their shoulders nearly brushing, and continued toward the far end of the street. No farewell was spoken. Sophie watched them go, her expression unreadable. For the first time since seeing Caleb again, the certainty she had carried wavered. He had not replaced her. He had moved on. Caleb did not look back. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet shift inside him, as if a weight he had carried without naming had finally been set down. Beside him, the Apache woman walked in silence, her steps in rhythm with his. No promises passed between them. No explanations were owed. Nathan did not stay in one place long enough to grow roots. That much became clear in the days that followed. Whenever he rode into town, his arrival announced itself before he spoke a word. His laughter came first, loud, confident, echoing off wooden storefronts. Stories followed close behind, tales of open trails, fast money, wide skies farther west. He spoke of places as if they were trophies and of people as if they were stops along the way. Sophie listened when he talked. Everyone did. Nathan had a way of filling empty space with promise. He spoke of what could be, bigger land, better horses, easier winters somewhere else. He spoke like a man who believed tomorrow would always be kinder than today. But when the talk ended, he never lingered. When the wind shifted and dust storms rolled in, Nathan was already saddling up. When a deal soured or tempers flared, he laughed it off, tipped his hat, and rode on. There was always another road, another town, another chance waiting just beyond the horizon. Caleb watched it all from a distance. He did not comment, did not compare himself aloud. He stayed. The summer turned hard that year. Rain came late, and when it did, it barely kissed the ground. The grass dried to brittle strands. Wells dropped lower. Livestock grew restless. Men in town began to speak in quieter voices. Caleb rose earlier than usual, hauling water long before the sun burned the sky white. He mended broken fence posts himself, replacing what drought and neglect had weakened. When a neighbor's cattle strayed, Caleb rode out without being asked. guiding them back under a sky that offered no mercy. He did not complain. When rumors began to circle, whispers about the Apache woman on his land, about boundaries crossed and lines blurred, Caleb did not rise to meet them. He did not defend himself in the saloon or trade sharp words on the street. He kept working. Some mornings he found strangers lingering at the edge of his property, watching from afar, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Caleb met neither with hostility nor welcome. He simply acknowledged their presence and returned to his task. The land saw everything. So did she. The Apache woman observed quietly from the shade when Caleb labored under the sun. She watched him lift water until his shoulders tightened, watched him repair what others abandoned, watched him turn away from town talk without bitterness. She did not ask him why he stayed. She already knew. One afternoon, the well pulley jammed, the rope fraying where it met the wheel. Caleb worked at it alone, hands raw, sweat cutting clean lines through dust on his skin. The sun pressed down, relentless. She brought him water, not offered, just set within reach. Caleb drank and nodded once. No words passed between them. In town, Nathan's stories grew larger as the days grew harsher. He joked about the heat, mocked the stubbornness of those who stayed when better options existed elsewhere. He hinted at moving on soon, north maybe, or west. "Why suffer when you don't have to?" he said more than once, grin easy, eyes already drifting toward the road. When trouble brushed close, an argument over grazing rights, a tense exchange at the edge of town, Nathan was suddenly elsewhere. His horse always seemed ready, his saddlebags light. Sophie noticed it before she admitted it to herself. She saw how Caleb returned to the same land every evening, dust-covered and silent, how he repaired instead of replaced, how he endured without promising anything would be different tomorrow. She saw Nathan smile his way out of responsibility. The Apache woman saw something else entirely. She saw a man who did not measure his worth by how far he could go, but by how firmly he could stand. A man who did not speak of loyalty, but practiced it daily. A man who stayed when staying cost something. Out here, survival was not a matter of charm, it was a matter of endurance. One evening, as the sun bled red along the horizon, Caleb stood near the fence line, surveying land that had tested him more than once. The Apache woman stood nearby, her gaze following his across the open prairie. Nathan rode past on the road beyond, hat tipped low, laughter trailing behind him like dust. He did not slow, did not look back. Caleb did not watch him go. He was already facing forward. The land stretched wide before him, scarred, honest, demanding. He remained where he was, boots planted, shoulders squared, the quiet weight of responsibility resting easily on him. Beside him, the Apache woman remained. She had seen enough. Sophie found Caleb at the edge of the land just before dusk. The day had bled itself dry, the sun slipping low and red behind the prairie. The heat loosened its grip at last, leaving the air still and expectant. Caleb stood near the fence line, coiling rope with steady hands, his movements unhurried, practiced. He heard her before he turned. Her steps were softer than he remembered. "Caleb." He faced her calmly. No surprise showed on his face, though he had known this moment would come. Some things always did. Sophie stood a few paces away, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The neat confidence she wore in town had slipped. Her dress was dusted at the hem. Her shoulders sagged as if the weight she carried had finally grown too heavy to hide. "I needed to talk to you," she said. Caleb nodded once. He did not invite her closer. He did not turn her away. They stood with the fence between them, the old boundary neither of them crossed. Sophie took a breath that trembled despite her effort to steady it. "I didn't know where else to go." Caleb waited. "The things I thought I wanted," she continued, words coming slower now. "They looked different when I reached them." She glanced back toward the road where dust still hung faintly in the distance. "Nathan, he's not steady. He never was. I just didn't want to see it." The confession cracked something open in her. The words followed more freely after that. "I thought choosing easy meant choosing safe," she said. "I thought movement meant progress. But every time things turned hard, he was already looking for the next place to run." She swallowed, eyes glistening in the dying light. I was tired of being alone in the middle of noise. Caleb listened. He felt no rush of anger, no flare of vindication, only a quiet recognition of something long understood. Sophie stepped closer to the fence, not touching it, not yet. I made a mistake, she said. Leaving you, leaving this life. I see that now. Her voice softened. You stayed. You always did. And I didn't. The wind stirred, carrying the dry scent of grass and earth between them. Caleb's gaze remained steady, grounded in the present. I thought if I came back, Sophie continued, maybe we could try again. Maybe I could choose right this time. The words hung there, fragile as dust. Caleb set the rope down carefully. When he spoke, his voice held no sharpness. I don't doubt you mean it, he said, and I don't doubt the road's been hard on you. Sophie's eyes searched his face, hopeful, aching. But, Caleb continued gently, wanting to come back isn't the same as belonging. Her breath caught. I stayed, he said, not because it was easy, because it was mine. And I learned something in the staying. Sophie waited, barely breathing. I learned I don't stand still anymore, Caleb said. I don't wait to be chosen. The truth settled between them, heavy but clear. Sophie's hands fell to her sides. Her shoulders sagged as understanding finally replaced hope. Is it because of her? She asked quietly. Caleb did not look toward the house, did not look toward the shade where another presence might have been felt. It's because of me, he replied. Silence followed. Long, honest. Sophie nodded slowly, tears tracing clean lines through dust on her cheeks. I knew that before I came, she said. I just needed to hear it. She reached out then, resting her fingers lightly on the fence, not crossing, just touching what remained between them. I'm sorry, she said, for leaving the way I did, for thinking comfort meant something it didn't. Caleb inclined his head. I know. That was all. No accusations, no absolution spoken aloud, just acknowledgement. Sophie stepped back, wiping her face with the heel of her hand. She managed a small, sad smile. You were never not enough, she said. I just wasn't ready for the life you chose. Caleb watched her turn toward the road. He did not follow, did not call her name. As she walked away, the prairie swallowed her steps, just as it always had. Caleb remained where he was, the fence at his back, the land stretching endlessly ahead. The past loosened its grip, not through force, but through release. Some doors did not close because of anger. They closed because the distance had already been crossed. The light was fading when Sophie spoke again. They stood where they had left off, the fence still between them, the prairie holding its breath. The sky had softened into long bands of amber and ash, and the first stars pressed faintly through the thinning blue. Sophie lifted her eyes to Caleb, steadying herself. I don't need promises, she said. I don't need you to explain anything. I just needed to know. Caleb met her gaze. He did not feel the urge to soften the moment. He did not reach for words to make it easier. He had learned over years of wind and drought that clarity was kinder than comfort. I've already told you what matter, he said calmly. Sophie waited. Caleb rested his hands against the fence rail, the wood warm from the day's heat. His voice stayed even, grounded, without edge or apology. I'm not angry, he said. I'm not holding on to what happened, but I'm not stepping backward either. She nodded once, absorbing it. I won't talk about anyone else, Caleb continued. This isn't about comparison. It's about where I stand. Sophie's fingers tightened briefly, then relaxed. Caleb took a breath, slow and deliberate. Then he said the truth he had earned. I don't stand waiting to be chosen anymore. The words landed without force. No accusation, no finality sharpened by bitterness. Just fact. Sophie closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the hope she had carried had settled into something quieter. Acceptance, edged with grief but free of resistance. I see that now, she said softly. You're not standing where I left you. Caleb shook his head once. No. The wind passed through the grass, low and constant. Somewhere beyond the rise of land, a coyote called, the sound lonely but unafraid. Sophie exhaled, long and unguarded. I think part of me believed you'd still be here, she admitted. Still waiting. Still willing to start over just because I came back. Caleb's expression did not change. I stayed, he said, but I didn't stop moving forward. That distinction mattered. Sophie's mouth curved into a small, rueful smile. That's the part I missed, she said. I thought staying meant standing still. She glanced once more toward the house, toward the land beyond it. She did not ask questions. She did not search for details. She understood enough. I don't regret loving you, she said, but I regret leaving the life that asked me to grow instead of run. Caleb inclined his head. He did not interrupt. He did not correct her. Forgiveness did not require agreement. They stood in silence for a moment longer, the kind of silence that did not demand filling. Then Sophie stepped back from the fence. Her shoulders straightened. The woman who had arrived seeking answers now carried them, even if they weighed more than she had hoped. I won't come back again, she said. Not like this. Caleb nodded. That's probably best. She hesitated, then offered a final look, one of gratitude, not longing. I'm glad you didn't break, she said, even if it means I don't belong here anymore. Caleb watched her turn toward the road. She walked away without looking back. Her figure grew smaller against the open land, the dust swallowing her steps just as it had once swallowed her certainty. When she disappeared beyond the rise, the space she left behind felt different, not empty, but settled. Caleb remained by the fence, listening to the quiet return. The past loosened its final hold, not through confrontation, not through tears, but through understanding. He did not feel relief. He felt alignment. Forgiveness, he knew now, was not an invitation to return. It was permission to continue on. Caleb turned toward the land he had chosen, the land that had chosen him back, and he did not look over his shoulder. After Sophie left, nothing dramatic followed. No sudden declarations, no turning points announced aloud. The land did not change its color. The sky did not open in approval. The prairie remained what it had always been, vast, demanding, indifferent to human closure. Caleb returned to his work the next morning. He rose before dawn, as usual, when the air still held its cool edge and the horizon barely hinted at light. He checked the fence line where the posts leaned from age and dry soil. The wire needed tightening. One section had sagged too low. She was already there. The Apache woman stood near the fence with a coil of wire in her hands. She did not look up when Caleb approached. She simply passed him the hammer when he reached for it, as if they had always shared this rhythm. They worked without speaking. Caleb set the post straight. She held it steady. He drove the nails in clean and sure. She trimmed the wire and pulled it taut. Dust rose around their boots, catching in the early light. No instruction passed between them. No thanks, only coordination. By mid-morning, the sun pressed down, heat spreading across the open land. Caleb fetched water from the well, filling 2 tin cups. He handed one to her. She accepted it with a nod and drank slowly, careful not to spill. They sat beneath the cottonwood's thin shade, backs against the trunk, listening to the land breathe. No one spoke of yesterday. No one spoke of tomorrow. At noon, Caleb prepared a simple meal, beans warmed over the fire, coarse bread broken by hand. He set a portion beside her without ceremony. She ate quietly, her gaze fixed on the open prairie, as if measuring the distance of the world beyond it. The food was plain, enough. Caleb noticed how she watched the horizon, not searching, not longing, just observing. He recognized the look. It was the look of someone who understood what it meant to stay alert without expecting rescue. The afternoon passed in steady labor. They checked the cattle. She moved among them with calm familiarity, unbothered by their size or weight. Caleb watched her keep a respectful distance, attentive but unafraid. The animals sensed it too, settling easily in her presence. As the sun began to lower, the air softened. Heat loosened its grip. Shadows stretched long and slow. They sat on the porch as evening settled in. Caleb rested his elbows on his knees, boots planted firmly on the earth. She sat nearby, not touching, not retreating. The sky shifted from pale gold to deep blue, stars pressing through one by one. They did not speak of names. They did not speak of where she would go next, or how long she would stay. No future was drawn between them. No questions were asked that required answers. The silence was not empty, It held weight, comfort, mutual understanding shaped by shared presence rather than promise. Caleb felt something unfamiliar and steady take root. Not urgency, not fear of loss, just balance. He did not feel chosen. He did not feel responsible. He felt accompanied. When the night grew cooler, she rose and moved toward the edge of the porch. She paused, then returned with a blanket from inside the house, placing it between them. Not over him, not over herself. Between. Caleb glanced at it, then at her. He said nothing. The coyotes called again in the distance, their voices echoing across the open land. Somewhere far off, wind moved through grass like water across stone. They stayed until the stars claimed the sky fully. When she finally stood, she did not announce her leaving. She simply stepped away, her silhouette fading into the dark near the fence line. Caleb did not stop her. He did not call her back. He knew she would return, or she would not. Either way, the land would remain. That night, Caleb slept without restlessness. For the first time in a long while, the quiet did not feel like absence. It felt like space, shared without demand. Acceptance did not arrive all at once. It came the way the West always delivered its truths, quietly, without ceremony, and only after time had done its measuring. At first, the town noticed her the way it noticed any change. With distance, a glance held half a second too long, a pause in conversation when she passed. No insults spoken, no welcome offered either. Just the careful watchfulness of people who had learned to guard what little certainty they possessed. She did not react. She rode into town when Caleb did, or walked beside him when the distance was short. She stood near the hitching post while he traded for supplies. She waited outside the store, eyes forward, posture steady. She did not browse, did not linger, did not invite curiosity. Caleb remained the same. He paid fair, spoke little, helped when help was needed, left when business was done. If anyone expected him to explain her presence, they waited in vain. Weeks passed. The novelty thinned. Attention drifted elsewhere. The land moved on. Someone noticed she carried water from the well without spilling a drop. Someone else saw her guide a restless horse with a quiet hand. When a child stumbled in the street, she knelt and set him upright, brushing dust from his knees without a word. No announcement followed, just observation. The drought pressed on, testing patience across the prairie. A fence collapsed under wind and neglect at the far edge of town. Before anyone asked, Caleb rode out with tools. She followed. They worked until the post stood straight again, hands moving with the same unspoken coordination the land had already witnessed. When a rancher's cattle broke loose one night, Caleb joined the search at first light. She rode beside him, silent, focused, unafraid of the dark or the cold. They returned the herd by noon. The rancher nodded once. That was all. Caleb did not change his routines. He did not soften himself for approval. He did not harden either. He continued to rise early, tend what was his, and return home by dusk. She continued to be there, not ahead of him, not behind, beside. The town noticed the steadiness. It was the kind of constancy the West respected. Not loud enough to challenge, not fragile enough to break. People began to include her presence in their expectations without speaking of it. When Caleb rode in, 2 sets of tracks followed. When he tied his horse, another waited nearby. No one asked her name. No one needed it. The land, more than the town, had the final say. Grass began to return in thin patches after a late rain. The well level rose just enough to ease worry. Cattle calmed. The prairie breathed easier, and so did the people who depended on it. On evenings when the sky turned copper and the air cooled, Caleb and the Apache woman sat on the porch as they always had. Not touching, not apart. The land stretched before them, scarred and honest, asking nothing but attention. She stayed. He did not change. And the land accepted them the way it accepted all things that proved their endurance, by allowing them to remain. One afternoon, Caleb noticed a basket left near the fence line. Bread inside, fresh, no note. He glanced toward the road and saw the baker already turning away. He said nothing. The Apache woman noticed too. She looked at the basket, then at Caleb. He nodded once. She set it inside the house. That night, coyotes called again, their voices rising and falling like the land itself. Caleb listened, boots planted on the porch, the familiar weight of the earth beneath him. He did not feel watched anymore. He felt included. Acceptance, he understood now, was not granted by words or gestures. It was earned by staying unchanged long enough for the land and the people upon it to stop resisting your presence. Beside him, she sat quietly, gaze fixed on the horizon. The prairie had made its decision. By the time autumn settled in, the road beyond the ranch grew quiet. Nathan was gone. No farewell, no announcement, just dust fading into distance, the way men like him always left, lighter than they arrived. The town barely noticed after a while. There were always new riders passing through, always another story louder than the last. Sophie was gone too. She did not return. Not to town. Not to the edge of the land. Her absence felt different from Nathan's. Less fleeting, more deliberate. A choice made and kept. Caleb did not wonder where she went. Some roads did not ask to be followed. The land remained. The fence stood straight again, posts driven deep, wire pulled tight and honest. The well pulley turned smooth beneath Caleb's hands, water rising clean and steady. No more creaks, no more hesitation. The things that could be mended had been. Caleb did not mark the changes as milestones. He simply lived within them. Evenings came earlier now. The sun dipped low, staining the prairie in copper and gold before surrendering to dusk. The air cooled. The wind carried the promise of colder days ahead. Caleb sat on the porch as he always did. She sat beside him, not touching, not apart. The space between them remained, deliberate and respected, a shared quiet shaped by time rather than intention. They did not speak of what they were. No future was named, no promise drawn into words. The land had taught them both that vows spoken aloud carried weight, and sometimes broke under it. Instead, there was presence. Caleb rested his boots against the worn wood, hands folded loosely, gaze fixed on the horizon. She watched the sky change color, the last light slipping between clouds, her posture calm, unguarded. The fence line cut a clean shape against the land. The well stood silent, whole. The cattle settled for the night, their low sounds steady and untroubled. Nothing asked for more. At some point, Caleb became aware of how little he carried inside him now. No questions looping without answers. No waiting for footsteps that would not return. No measuring himself against men already gone. He had stayed, not because he was promised anything in return, but because staying had become the truest thing he knew how to do. She shifted slightly, pulling a blanket closer as the temperature dropped. Caleb noticed, rose, and fetched another from inside. He set it between them. Not over her, not over himself, between. She nodded once. The prairie darkened. Stars pressed through the sky, sharp and unsoftened. Coyotes called again in the distance, their voices rising and falling like breath across the land. Caleb listened. He did not feel alone. He did not feel claimed. He felt aligned, with the land beneath him, with the quiet beside him, with the choice he had already made without naming it. She stood eventually, stretching her legs, then sat back down in the same place. Nothing had shifted. Nothing needed to. The night deepened. Somewhere far off, a train whistle sounded and faded. Another road, another journey, not his. Caleb remained where he was. Beside him, the Apache woman remained too. No hands reached, no words followed. The land did not require them. Out here, presence was commitment enough. And as the prairie held them both, unchanging, demanding, honest, the question lingered, unanswered, waiting for whoever listened closely enough to hear it. In a land where everyone passes through, will you choose the one who says they will stay, or the one who never leaves?